So, the Gollum game is finally out, after being postponed for quite a while. There never really was any hype for this game, but is it as bad as people say? Well, here's my thought about the game, after playing for 3 hours. We've seen the reviews, a 2 from The Guardian, 3 from Inverse, 4 from GameScape, and 6.5 from TechRouter, which is the most generous review I've seen. If you watched my recent stream from the game, you know I ended on a 4 out of 10. Feel free to watch that, by the way, if you want to hear my first impressions of the game. In this video, I'm going to dive into different sections of the game and talk about the high and low points, so let's jump right into it. Bugs and glitches. Before jumping into the story of the game, I think we should address the elephant in the room, the bugs and glitches. God, there were a lot of glitches, especially in the early game. And let me just mention I've played a ton of games on this PC without any issues. Games like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord, Shadow of War, Crusader Kings 3 and Hogwarts Legacy. No issues with any of those games, but quite a lot with the Gollum game. I will say the glitches at times ruined the gameplay experience and almost made it unplayable. I can definitely see some rage quit after getting killed because the game glitched. There were also some quite amateurish bugs, some texture bugs with a lot of clipping, but that's quite normal in games. At one point you need to flee from some walks or whatever, and if you by accident hit the top of the wooden fences, you slide on them. Then there's Gollum disappearing for a second or two during some cutscenes, and lastly, just a lot of clunky movement where Gollum sort of teleports around. So not really a smooth gaming experience. On top of that, I noticed I couldn't turn off motion blur, which is something I just hate in games. It wasn't too bad in it, but still odd I can't turn it off. Of course, newly released games have similar issues, but I really expected more from a game that was postponed for so long and had extra time to fix bugs. Story. We all know the character Gollum, and the game clearly expects you to know him as well. We start in the dungeons of Thranduil's halls, where Gandalf questions Gollum, and then he tells his whole backstory. We start out in Mordor, which is an unusual choice in my opinion, if we talk lore-wise. There's a lot of stuff going on before this, so it feels a bit odd that it's simply reduced to a short intro. I really feel they downplay the whole point of the character, his desire for the ring. It's the only reason he actually left his cave in the Misty Mountains and started to hunt for Bilbo. It feels quite weird to suddenly be in Mordor and not really have any idea why we're there. I do expect we will see more from Shelob in the game. So far I'm a bit disappointed we haven't befriended her, despite that is what the orc seems to indicate in the game. At one point you're meant to be caught by the Nazgul, which kinda surprised me as it took quite some time to trigger the cutscene. After that we are imprisoned in Barad-dûr and talk with an orc and a slave in the prison cell. After that you have to do some task in Mordor that just feels a bit unnecessary and tedious. I do think the story will pick up though. I think the last half of chapter 2 was the best part of the game so far at least. So yeah, there should really be more focus on the ring, Gollum's desire for it, and just some better storytelling, explaining what's going on and why we as players should care. Art style. The art style is something a lot of people were unhappy with early on, when we first saw a couple of images from the game. It's obviously different to Peter Jackson's adaptation, I don't really mind that, but I think there are some questionable designs here and there. The environment looks great pretty much everywhere, but Gandalf had a black beard, and Thranduil's outfit didn't impress me too much either. I think the worst part was the orc armors, cone helmets and pauldrons that looked like giant snails. Maybe that's just me, but it felt out of place. Lore. Lore-wise the game is quite decent. Obviously there's some deviations, but there's also a lot of stuff from the actual lore, which is a pleasant surprise at least. I did fear they would completely disregard the lore and just change the story to fit whichever narrative they wanted to tell. There's also some tiny details I didn't expect to see in the game, like slaves in Mordor, and I also kinda like the giant elephant skull in the dungeons of Barad-dûr. I really need to play a bit more of the game before I can say any more about it though. Gameplay and game mechanics. The gameplay was extremely tedious at times, and honestly just felt like a climbing simulator. There's also some mechanics that you can do, but won't use a lot in the game. It took me quite a few attempts before I realized crawling could be used for sneaking past guards too. At times the game really feels like Assassin's Creed, but without all the combat, the rich history and cool gear to upgrade. I think a lot of gamers like choices in games, and there were a few of those as well, where you either have to side with Gollum or Smeagol. At times it felt like it didn't matter, but near the end of chapter 2, you have to pick between 2 characters to put blame on, which seems to be something that affects the story more than I thought at first. So that's pretty cool. Overall, I didn't really enjoy the game for its mechanics, and if it hadn't been a Lord of the Rings game, I would have stopped playing after maybe 30 minutes. Graphics. I think it's a pretty game. The environment looks very nice, no doubt about that. It's mainly the glitches that really bothers me, and the fact you can't turn off motion blur. If you plan to buy the game, make sure to check out the specs, as you need a fairly new graphics card, and also a very good one. I've also heard a lot of people crashed while playing, and that there are some serious issues with the graphics, but it's not something I experienced myself. Voice acting, music, and sounds. I think the overall voice acting is good. The voice actor for Gollum does a really fine job, of course different to Andy Serkis, but still a very good job. Some of the voice acting for orcs worked really well too. The screams for the Nazgul, however, well, I heard them scream several times before I realized they were meant to sound like them. It wasn't at all scary or intimidating, but rather a bit silly and almost comical. I noticed some of the explosion sounds also sounded off and a bit cartoonish. So there's definitely room for sound improvement in this game. I think the music for the game is really good. I didn't really pay too much attention to it, which to me is a good thing, as it didn't take me out of the game or felt like it didn't belong there. So great job with the music. So my final thoughts. I still think it's a 4 out of 10 game. It has some serious bugs and glitches that can be fixed, but the storytelling is too weak in my opinion, and no patch or hotfix can really save that. I think the game had some unexplored opportunities that was reduced to a short cutscene in the introduction, so that was a bit disappointing too. I really need to see more of the game to see if the game improves, but I doubt I will ever give it more than a 5. Despite that, I think the game really improved during Chapter 2, so if you decide to buy the game and give it a chance, make sure to play through Chapter 2 at least. I think the game is unusually pricey for what it is, so I wouldn't buy it at full price if I was you. Wait for it to be on sale. I'm likely going to stream it at least one more time. I'm curious to see the Vales of Anduin and Mirkwood, which haven't really been teased in the game. I just know we're meant to go there eventually. So that's my thoughts on the game. Please consider leaving a like and subscribe. If you want to know Gollum's real story, make sure to watch this video next. As always, thank you all for watching and being part of the Council of the Rings. Farewell till next time.